prior to now, what have you been doing to manage your hair loss?
Just been using Rogaine or minoxidil. That's all I've been doing. I've tried Propecia, I've tried Avodart, and I didn't like the side effects that came along with those.
Okay. And how has just having hair loss in general affected you in your daily life?
Quite a bit, actually. I started losing my hair, I think, noticeably when I was like 19. And so, it affected my confidence. I didn't want to go anywhere without a hat for a very long time. And eventually went and saw a doctor and had 2 hair transplants. And even after that, I really wasn't that satisfied with the results and still a little uneasy about it even now in public.
And that left you with a pretty big scar on the back of your head?
Left me with a scar in the back of my head, probably about 4 or 5 inches long. And so I can't really shave my head even after the transplant, so that's why I looked into SMP.
Okay. And can you turn around just to show us the scar
Sure.
that you got going on? Alright, it kind of has a bluish hue to it, and that's from the people that you've already had try and touch it up?
Yes, so I reached out to one of the larger companies that's out there right now that I felt, had some decent results online, and went ahead and had them do just a base treatment on the scar before I shaved my head. That way, when I did shave my head, at least there was at least one, treatment done on the scar. Fortunately, none of the pigment stayed the first treatment, and so we went back for a second treatment. Again, it didn't stay, and 5 treatments went by, and he had to go a little bit more aggressive after the third, and now it just kind of muddled together. It looks almost like it's just shaded one solid color.
Now you say pigment, but do they call it pigment, or they use like an ink, or they tell you what it's made of?
Yeah, so it's basically, I don't think it's, too much rocket science to figure out that it seems to be basically like a charcoal gray wash. They're pretty open about the fact that they use charcoal and, the confidence that it doesn't change colors, etc. However, it's, for me, seems more like a watercolor versus using maybe like an oil paint or something like that. So I don't know if it's, an immune system or what the case is, but even on my first consultation with them, there was a gentleman that was in there getting some extra treatments done because he said that it wasn't staying in his skin.
And do you also have kind of a bluish hue to it?
Yeah, but it was faded so much that it was really hard for me to tell. I didn't, get too close up or anything, but you could tell that it wasn't sticking in his skin, and they basically just made it seem like, oh, it was his first or second treatment, they'll just do another treatment. That's kind of the process, but seems to be kind of a common fact. There's even an online video about that company, kind of with multiple sessions having to be done, and then at the end it just kind of looks like one blurred blotch.
Yeah, and that's what it looks like on the scar. When I look at it too, that looks pretty just like a meshed up blur of multiple attempts going over and over.
Yeah, just basically solid grayish hue to it, I guess.
Yeah, and yeah, that's the thing about anything that's pure black is it'll kind of look bluish, especially in whiter skin like yours.
Yeah, I've seen some of that online where it's just kind of like a bluish or purple line where they have attempted to cover the scar. I've seen some pictures like that.
Based on your experience now, you don't trust pictures, obviously, so you got a patch test done with me, and so you're feeling more confident about getting this done.
Yeah, actually, the patch test was done right next to a patch test that the other company did, and it was pretty much night and day. The patch test that they had done, in contrast to yours, was a little bit, almost looked like the pigment or ink migrated a lot more, whereas yours was pretty much pinpoint, quite a bit more solid, and actually smaller dots.
So why are you getting SMP? Or let's back up. Do you recommend transplants to anyone else? Would you recommend transplants to anyone else?
No, I absolutely would never recommend getting a transplant. It's kind of a temporary solution and an expensive one. it basically will cover where you're balding, and they'll put you on medication that may or may not work. They'll put you on Propecia, and all these other different options, laser lights and stuff like that. But eventually you're going to lose the rest of that hair on top, and so you're going to be stuck with shaving your head or getting a toupee, and if you've got scars, you're going to be in the same boat that I am. And you know, hopefully SMP will disguise it enough, but no, I would not recommend getting a hair transplant.
All right, and so why are you getting scalp micropigmentation done?
SMP is something that I have been researching probably, you know, for the last 7 or 8 years. I would think, and honestly, seems like the best solution. If it's done right, it looks completely natural. Less maintenance. You're not going to have scars. It's considerably less than a hair transplant. Living in Arizona, I would never wear a hairpiece. It's too hot. And I wouldn't want to keep up on that maintenance, which is obviously going to be 10 times more expensive than just getting scalp micropigmentation.
All right, and we kind of went over this a little bit, but what are your you kind of went over your experience with another scalp pigmentation company around town, and overall you can just say it was a bad experience, right?
It was an awful experience. You know, going into it, you know, I seemed quite confident that they knew what they were doing, they knew what the outcome would be, and you know, even after the second or third attempt at trying to make the ink stick, the world-renowned practitioner basically said, "Hey, at the end of the day, I have ink and a needle," and that was his answer to why his inks weren't sticking and why I was in the situation that I was in. So I was completely dissatisfied after that.
Yeah, and they are appropriately calling it an ink because that is ink, and ink will do that. It'll blur and it will fade in this lower level of the skin, and the stuff that DermiMatch that I use is a thick, almost clay-like pigment, which is why it stays.
Yeah.
And it stays in that top layer and doesn't migrate. So you know that because you've done your research, but just in your own words, quickly, like what is your reason for going to DermiMatch?
You know, there's only DermiMatch and the other provider locally in Arizona, and so after having that experience with the bigger provider, which is turned out to be a horrible experience, I came to DermiMatch, and just seeing the test patch next to their test patch, it's night and day on how that looks and how it stayed in my skin. And you know, at this point, DermiMatch is kind of saving me from an awful situation where I'm pretty much stuck with what they have on the back of my head right now, and it's not even completed. It doesn't match. It doesn't blend, and you know, I got to move forward from there. So luckily, DermiMatch is here.
And since we're not corporate, we don't have that huge overhead, so you're also saving a lot of money, right?
Saving a significant amount of money. If it wasn't for DermiMatch, I would probably have to go to another large provider, which would probably charge me, you know, $5,000, maybe more, because they would have to blend and fix what this other provider has already done. And so, you know, it's a fraction of that price, and the results that I've seen, and just the test patch alone, it's an amazing situation that I was put into to come across your website.
All right, so we're gonna get started now, and we'll get your testimonial afterwards.